Okay, it is 5:35. Looks like most people are back in their seats. A few folks making their way back, but the two most important people for this next section are seated together. And again, that's our Common Council President Helen Hudson and our Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens. So as the three of us just discussed, we have an hour if we need it, but if we don't need it, that's fine too. Looks like there is some activity in the chat line, so they'll work their way through that. And then any other questions that come up. Again, we understand a roundtable discussion is challenging in this virtual setting, but we're gonna work through it. So without further ado, President Hudson, Deputy Mayor Owens, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. Looking forward to a robust conversation. Thank you all for your time. We're going to encourage you, and people are doing that now, to please use your chat feature to signal that you have a question, or if you want to post it there. At this point, I'm going to call on the people who actually posted so they can actually say what it is they posted if they'd like. You'll be able to, we'll call on you and then we'll get you on your microphone activated. Council President?
All righty, so as they say, housekeeping. Attendees can submit questions and comments using the chat feature. And if we don't get to your question tonight, we will have a follow-up in writing. We'd ask participants to keep questions or comments on priorities to under 2 minutes. We'll give you a notice when you are getting to that point, and we can mute you, but we do not want to. So let's kind of try to keep it under 2 minutes. And if it's something that's lengthy, we'll get back to you in writing. Thanks.
All righty, so let's get going. We have a 5th District Councilor, Joe Driscoll, posted in the chat. Joe, if you could just speak to your question, please.
Yeah, I was just saying that at times the issues feel very high level and distance. I was just curious what, some of the people think are the biggest obstacles to getting the numbers where we need to get them to. It feels in many ways that, we can't move fast enough. So what are the biggest obstacles we think, and what are the best ways we can focus our energies to try to address it from some of the experts, particularly the folks in the union and perhaps DECA and some of the others that are seeing the gaps better than us. What are the biggest obstacles, and what can we do to address them in as quick a time frame as possible to get to the numbers we want?
DECA, we'll encourage you to take that, and then Greg, if you can also add,
Right.
That would be great.
Sure. So from the Urban Jobs Task Force, some of the research that we've done, we found that the biggest obstacle, as I said, were barriers to employment. So maybe people are having issues with childcare. Maybe people are having issues with transportation, construction work, right? You might be training, you may start off in Syracuse, and then you have to go to Oswego, and you have to go to Auburn, and you have to go to Albany. So for people that are living in poverty, that's really difficult if you don't have a vehicle. In addition, right, startup costs to work. Maybe if you get accepted into an apprenticeship or a program, now you can buy work boots, you can buy a tool belt. If you don't have that, whatever, $150 to start, it's really that serious. These are some of the things that we have heard. Additionally, I think, so that, what did I say? I said childcare, I said transportation, I said money, also money while doing the program, right? So there are a lot of workforce development programs that we have out there, but there's no payment for them. So you might be in 16-week, 24-week workforce development program, but if there's no pay for it, and it's 7 to 3 every day for, whatever, 16 weeks, and you need other income, you might not be able to do that, right? You might already have 2 jobs. So it's being able to provide an income for people then. Also, we found, people need more help as far as tutoring, as far as the entrance exams. So things like that. So needing those community wraparound support services, which I know that the city is working hard to identify, and we have to find who are those individuals that can help and assist with that. And we actually do have a lot. It's just bringing everyone together and finding additional funding to add to the supports that we already have. That's my.
Also, just before you go, Greg, DECA, you said to ensure that in this big table conversation, we're expanding the option for those individuals in those areas of expertise to be part of the conversation. Yes. Greg?
Actually, a lot of the challenges that DECA just highlighted are very live challenges, whether they're existing members or prospective members. Transportation has always been an issue, especially as some of the jobs actually get a little bit remote. It makes it a little more difficult. And we encourage partnering up and, ride sharing and that. It just makes it easier and more economical. But one of the things that has come to light, and it really seems to have no end in sight, is the childcare issue. We're experiencing where members, even pre-COVID, we're experiencing that members are having so much difficulty with childcare, and especially newborns, that they're choosing to not take a job because they're going to be working for nothing or going backwards. So that is a huge impediment towards not only, I don't believe, just the construction industry, but it does really impact us pretty hard. One of the good steps going forward is the recent developments and the emphasis on STEAM curriculum or STEM curriculums, because it's really good to see that America is waking up again, saying that, not everybody's built for college, and some people like to work with their hands and all of that, and versus the academic route that you're forced to go through to keep your high school rank, to keep your family happy and all of that. So that movement's been, relatively new, and it's all going in the right direction. And I think there's going to be tremendous opportunity there, because there's been high degrees of communication with the high schools and the city school program, and even some of the suburb schools. Alan Marzullo is one of the participants on today's call, but Alan has been working in the IBEW Local 43 and the carpenters and a lot of the trades that are here in the council. We've been meeting with helping with development of curriculum and all of that, because we kind of need that, because it helps with some of the construction math and some of the skill sets required for a foundation in the technical and engineering world that we kind of work in. So we think it's going to be a few years where we're going to start getting a higher level of quality from a construction standpoint coming out of school districts, but it is moving in the right direction. But to emphasis DECA, it really is childcare and transportation that boils down to.
Oh, I'm muted. Greg, could you touch a little bit, you said something about the retention piece of it. Can you touch a little bit on that retention piece?
Yeah, so regardless of what trade you are, there is a level of attrition in the construction industry. And, it really doesn't show any, I don't think there's any one column or demographic or anything that it impacts more than the other. But I will tell you that a lot of people, when they do go through all the process and get selected and go to work, it's not uncommon in the first year to have 20 to 30 to 40% say, this really isn't cut out for me, whether it's working in the air, working in the weather, working outside, or, the skill set. So I think what we've been trying to focus on with the younger workforce or the newer workforce that's going to be applying to the organizations is we're going to be having more of an outreach and explanation. And that way we can establish expectations, regardless if you want to go lay block for a living, or if you want to connect steel or build cabinets or run conduit, because we all have similar baseline multi-craft skill sets that transcend through everybody, but we also have a high degree of specialty when you start peeling the trades back and looking. And a lot of folks that look good, interview well, score well, seem to give us a good indication that they're going to perform well. It's really up to that individual to see, a lot of times they're doing well on the job and they're making it to work on time, but they may come in and say, I don't want this for 40 years. I can do this for a summer, but I don't want this for 40 years. And it's honorable to, when you recognize that, it's honorable to say, maybe I need to do something else. So the mentoring program would come in just to capture some of the ones that may be unsure if that's what they want to do, or if that's what they did if they made the right choice. And that's to help encourage them and show them, hey, it's not so bad. Just stick with it a little bit. We can all get through this together. We all did. And we think that's going to aid in a really large goal in retention overall in any program.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. Just to Greg's point, that also just brings up the fact that there are individuals. I had a friend that went 4 years of college to be a teacher until she taught for 2 semesters in a classroom and decided this is not what I want to do. And so in the vein of what you just said, Greg, also thinking about training and thinking about workforce development, they still have developed construction-related skills that can be transferred over to other career paths. So we should also be thinking about that.
Absolutely. Spot on, Sharon.
Yeah. Lynette, you put a statement in. Would you like to reiterate or to expound on it?
I got a lot of stuff. I got a lot of noise going on in the background, so I have to apologize, and I can't really stop it at this point.
He's fine.
I just think that it needs to be.
You're muted.
Hey, sorry guys, I'm having some technical difficulties here. I just think that there needs to be I will expand on that point in a minute, but I just think before we get there, I think there needs to be a recognition that there's a lot more at play and a lot more at stake here when we're talking about getting people jobs in Syracuse, particularly people of color jobs. And I think I hear a lot of focus being on that person or that individual, but there's a long history of exclusion in the construction field when it comes to people of color. And I think that if we're not intentional about making sure that we're hiring people of color and then providing those support systems, and that comes along with first having to recognize what are the structural systems at an employment that will make someone not want to stay there. And so it's not always about a person not showing up for work because it's not what they want to do or they've chosen a different career path. It's because they don't necessarily feel welcomed, because they don't see people who look like them there. And so a lot of part of it is especially construction companies and others. I'm not just trying to pinpoint them, but have to look internally to see, well, what can we do in our environment to make sure that people of color, when they come here, they feel welcome and they want to stay and they want to participate in the employment process. And I think that's the piece that's not really clear to me of how we're going to be intentional in making sure that we're reaching out to those folks who not only want to be hired, but we're making sure that retention is there. So it's not always about just inclusion, but it has to be about retention, and it has to be about understanding that these people who are coming in probably have experienced a lot of disenfranchisement and a lot of other barriers that most folks don't have. And so if they are showing up 10 to 15 minutes late, it's not because they took an extra nap, it's not because they're lazy, it's not because they didn't want to be to work, but maybe they have some barriers that prevented them from being there right at 9 o'clock on the dot, and understanding that there's going to need to be some wiggle room in whatever proposal happens that needs to include that type of thought process of being just really conscious of people in particular communities that are facing a lot more barriers than others, and there needs to just be a wide range or a wide net of what that would look like.
And I want to just be fair and make sure I'm got about 30 seconds if you wanted to talk about the other point you made.
No, I'm just trying to hold it together in this background information, so I'm not going to do that to y'all.
Okay, all right. Ricky. So Ricky, you had a pretty long post that when we save the chat, we'll be able to pull that apart. But did you want to summarize what you typed there?
Yes, Sharon.
Okay.
Lanessa had an opportunity to really focus in on some of the issues. I wanted to get to some of the larger issues because, interestingly, every time we have this conversation, for me, it's astounding that we circle back to this point. And I just think when we're looking at an alignment of issues that we're focused on the outcomes. So the number one thing for me when we're addressing the systemic barriers that are in place, and we look at the number of tradesmen of color who have obtained a license in Onondaga County, We've been on nearly 2 hours and that hasn't come up yet. So for all the labor that we're discussing and the labor development, I was specifically disappointed in the stats related to the teal and the I-81 project. Specifically, when we foiled that data, we know that less than 1% of the local labor that was used on that project was local. We also know that there were no machine operators of color on that project. We named a number of subcontractors, for example, and we named a number of DBEs, but none of them were in the minority-based DBE companies. And so until we address some of the real systemic issues for me, I have to look at the outcomes, the overall outcomes. Again, we're looking at 5 decades of one tradesman with a master license. And so in an approach for me, we have an apprenticeship program that is state approved, that is minority based, and Nadante, he is the example of someone that's navigated that system successfully. But he wasn't a part of this conversation for me. And so that also is a problem, in that he's not invited to these conversations. And you want to learn about how to evaluate a program for its efficacy, and someone who's actually reaching and training those individuals, he should be at the table. And if he's not at the table, that's a mistake for us. I also believe in terms of mentorship opportunities, he'd be able to successfully give advice to some of the other workforce programs, just in terms of what he's working with specifically and dealing with specifically. And I know his main area is, if we could identify, and I think it would be the most efficient for everybody in the cohort, is to concentrate on journeymen that have prior years experience. To all of your point, you don't want someone coming in starting and they get in and they work for 6 months and find out this isn't them. If we could identify a number of 3rd year or 4th year apprentices and have them paired through a company like Nadante's company, I think that that would maximize results for all of us. Trying to build a workforce up all the way from the ground up without taking in those historic barriers, I think is a mistake. We're not addressing any of those issues into the systemic issues that Lanessa was talking about, and why that workforce isn't showing up for that union work or otherwise. And we really need to address that.
Thank you, Ricky. Really good points. We're starting, and no disparaging by saying this, starting at the ground level, when we have people that have really been able to move through the process and can use experience not only for helping us understand what worked and what was hindering us, but also as a active part of bringing other people along. So thank you for that.
Yes.
All righty, I'm seeing there's a general question. It was sent privately. They'd like to ask what specific actions will be taken to ensure that the residents of Syracuse from the immediate areas that have been devastated by the I-81 overpass are going to have a fair opportunity to receive one of the skilled positions that can lead to a career in the construction industry, and not just a temporary parking lot or food vendor position during the construction. They said they see cranes and projects all over the city, and none of those workers in those projects appear to be from Syracuse. Who am I gonna ask to touch on that one? I'm just gonna ask general question out there. So
I'll say that conversation is a major point of what DECA talked about with a community workforce agreement. I mean, those are the components that would be hammered out to be able to ensure that people are getting the opportunities available. DECA, am I missing that, or?
No, you're right. And honestly, that's why I had to make the point that I made to Mark at the DOT, is to say, you know, we did research on some of the projects that he mentioned and more. And what we found was, not only were there not many workers of color or women, but there were little to no local workers from Syracuse City residents on projects. So what we're saying is, if we want to achieve those goals to maximize the people in the city that benefit, and for people of color, we have to be intentional, and things have to be embedded in the language. There is no other way. And once we get them in there, they have to be monitored and enforced.
Provided the supports necessary to be successful.
Wrap around.
And similar to what Ricky talked about with those journeymen that have been through the process that can aid that, provide that support. So Phil brings up a very important conversation, and what kind of outreach will be done to traditionally underrepresented communities. That I'm going to put a period right there. I think again that is part of a community workforce agreement conversation that includes recruitment, on the job support, retention. All of that is part of that, and also the fact of the matter is that construction work is job to job to job. And so I also want to, and I've talked to Helen about this, or to Dominic about this, also being able to equip people. The big project will come and go, but the sustainable long-term work is construction-related skill building that puts you in a position to be a manager at a facility, and you're operating, and that sustainable living wage, insurance-bearing work. But the B part of what Phil said is personal to me. So, and how do we reach out specifically to the disability community? For instance, it was not sign language interpreted. You're absolutely right, Phil. You're absolutely right. But the disability community, I have a son who is in the spectrum, who very much is never in a conversation like this because of the assumption that he's not able to do this kind of work. So again, I think and I'm not going to do all the talking, but I think again to Decca's point about who's at the big table and in the conversations about how we're going to create a workforce process, that expertise needs to be in the room, because people who don't work with or understand the disability community don't even know what questions to ask. Phil, is there anything else you'd like to add to that or take away if I'm completely losing it?
I just want to add that that's I mentioned earlier. Like we see that the leadership at this table is going to span over time. So when it's timely for people to come in, it's going to take months for all this to be done. So it's probably not appropriate, right, for people who are doing recruitment to be here right now. We still got to do other things. So I think as time goes on, when the time is right, all of these partners will be added in, and the community can rest assured that the Urban Jobs Task Force is going to make all the noise so that all the players be added to this table as the time goes on. And we know that the mayor's office has been great partners in this process so far. So we expect a good outcome.
Vanessa, can you stay on board? Would a CWA or related workforce agreement on 81 openly include public health and environmental justice concerns? The senator's bill local includes improving job quality and training. Do you see that, Kyle? It's Peter King.
You want to take that?
Peter, are you on? Do you want to speak to your question? Okay, I don't think we have Peter anymore.
All right. So we want to the next.
Just one last point. I'm sorry. I didn't reference the fact we did mention DBEs specifically, and I want to round back to that because we know that a percentage of this project, a large percentage, in fact, will be dedicated to disadvantaged business enterprise companies. There is currently one in the area. I know the county is doing a terrific job with Larry Stackhouse's company and getting him opportunities. I know the city's been extending him opportunities. What he's been doing, and speaking of mentorship opportunities, he's taken 3 or 4 other smaller local trucking companies under his wing and has provided them mentorship opportunities, really, through the projects that he's received from Onondaga County. And he's got his largest one to date now. So just making sure that there are some support systems for a Larry, or he's the only one that I can identify right now. But if we can support those DBE trucking companies, because we know that'll be a large component, I believe that they can have a significant impact on the workforce as well, because each of the smaller companies have, Larry's at just 2 employees, but the folks that he's working with are bringing 20, 25 folks with him as well.
Ricky, as well, this is an opportunity to identify additional DBEs.
Right.
That we have to pre-start.
Yes.
I just wanted
Can I
to
just
chime in
hop
real
in
quick.
for a second? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
No, I was actually going to say, Linessa, I saw you on the chat line trying to break through, so I was trying to give you assist. And I also just wanted to note that some that are in the chat line are not able to speak because they're not technically around the table. So for those folks, we'll just continue to take your messages from the chat. But Linessa, floor is yours.
Thank you, because that makes sense of why I couldn't put my question in the Q&A box. So yeah, I wanted to circle back a little bit to the comment about employees on this project living in the local area. And I would encourage folks on this call to look at the I-70 project in Colorado, because they did a really good job at making sure that I think they ensured about 20% of the project employed that community that lived within 500 feet of that project. And so there's a way that we can start kind of looking at other projects across the nation to say, how can we pick up some of their best practices? And that was one of the ones that I found very interesting because it had the highest rate of employees who actually lived in the impacted area as required as part of the project. And so I just wanted to kind of encourage people to look at the I-70 project. They also had a lot of things on the I-70 project about mitigating impacts in the neighborhood. So one of the examples are, if they're going to hear a lot of noise during the construction, they actually put noise barriers, wall insulation and things in people's houses to try to encourage to make sure people's lives were a little comfortable during that project. So that's a good place to start.
Linessa, do you know if I-70, because I would really want to look at that, do you know if I-70 had federal highway dollars in it, or was it a state project? Because if it was a federal project, they couldn't, we can't put local preferences.
So yeah, the project was very similar to this project, which most large highway projects are federally funded. States really can't afford to do that type of work. And so this project was funded through the Federal Highway Administration and also Colorado's DOT. And so there was a joint effort there. I should say with a caveat, all of the things that happened in that project that are also great came out of litigation. So it wasn't like Colorado DOT was like, hey, we want to spend all this extra money on making sure people are employed. But it was a very similar fact pattern where you had a community, that community was a Latinx community that was divided by the original build of the Colorado highway. And so they were kind of making that same argument that we have here. And so through litigation, the Colorado DOT did those things. And so there are ways to get those things done. I mean, we don't want to have to go through litigation.
Right. We would hope not to have to do that. So can people just collaborate?
And nobody really wants to delay the projects. And so, I mean, we would hope that people just be encouraged to do these things because it's the right thing to do and not because we have litigation happening.
Thank you, though. I'm going to look at that. That's because that is not one that was in our list of several. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. We have a question from Twiggy Billieu. Twiggy, are you on? Okay, so I'm going to read her question. And it said, to all participants, in our county, we have provided a multitude of construction training that did not lead to jobs for Black and brown trainees. And then she went on to state that only a few, where did it go? Wait, where did it go?
Well, while you're looking for that, Helen, I think that's the crux of this entire project, is that we're not looking for people to be trained for the sake of training. We've had enough of that in our community over the course of decades. So the conversation around this is actually viable work that's going to put money in the hands and the pockets of people so they can support their families.
Council President, I have the full question if you'd like me to read it. It says in our country,
Go ahead.
It says in our country, in our county, we have provided a multitude of construction training that did not lead to jobs for Black and brown trainees. Only a few actually got employment, but hundreds have OSHA 10 certifications, blueprint reading certifications, and nicer, but not employment with construction companies or unions. How do we change this expressly so that the other hundreds with real experience can get hired? So the question is speaking to, in the past, we've done construction training programs with certifications, and it didn't lead to employment. You know, how can we expressly make sure that people who are being trained and going through apprenticeships can be guaranteed placement and employment on projects with 81?
I'm just gonna say it would have to be spelled out in any agreement. And to, I think it was Ricky or somebody else's point monitor to ensure that we're meeting those agreed upon points.
All right.
Sharon, this is Aggie Lane in Helen.
Yeah.
I just wanted to respond. It's maybe just backing up what you said. They have to be actual goals put into the CWA. And then there needs to be monitoring and enforcement of those goals and a workforce pipeline that's going to help meet those goals. But without goals and without the enforcement and monitoring, we have nothing.
Agreed.
Agreed. All righty, we're going to go to Linda. Linda says, what is being done for childcare? Some employers offer their own services. Can unions do something collectively? So I'm going to turn that over to Greg and Jim and Mason. You guys there? I think we did. I think we lost him. Hello?
He said,
There you are.
You're muted again, Greg. Hit it again. There you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're having technology challenges here today. What was the statement on the last one? I apologize.
What is being done for childcare? Some employees offer their own services. Can unions do something collectively?
Well, we've talked about trying to do everything from medical coverage collectively to childcare, and it's really difficult because you're talking 15 different organizations with 15 different funding streams. It's not like it's one employer, providing a place for 6,000 families to utilize from that standpoint. It would be a pretty big facility, and it would also warrant one heck of a discussion of where to actually locate it from that standpoint. So there hasn't been, because that's also a money thing. I thought you were just asking me on the comment I just submitted going back on the OSHA 10. OSHA 10 is mandated on every public works project, period. That's a law. So OSHA 10 is a great start, but you have to have OSHA 10 to even go on a public works project. Anything that is paid prevailing rate, every single worker there is supposed to have OSHA 10. So, and every supervisor is supposed to have OSHA 30 from that standpoint. So it's a good start, but I just want to emphasize OSHA 10 is one of the many certs that just helps somebody get there. It doesn't guarantee anybody's there. It's a law that's a requirement for all public work. Just so I can put that out there so everybody understands that.
I will also speak to Linda, the fact that again, the need for child care is an expertise that people who are in that world 24/7 understand, and it would be we would be wrong to make the assumption that any one of these partners who don't do that work every day has the capability of thinking holistically about it, but can add the technical assistance. So to Decca's point earlier, we're moving on this train, and childcare professionals who understand childcare need to talk to the unions, need to talk to the companies that are engaged in this, the community stakeholders. They are the expertise.
Sharon, if I could say something, that's what I was hoping to get to. There has to be a way to fund these people who can do the job, to do daycare at night when people have to work at night, or daycare during the day when they have to be here and there and everywhere. There's got to be a way to do that, and I think that the unions can help fund some of that as well. So it's not that they would be doing it themselves, but providing some resources to make sure it happens. because clearly it's never going to be a problem that's solved unless we do it ourselves. I mean, it's not going to happen unless it's provided. And, you know, a single mother who wants to get a job, has done the training at maybe at Jubilee, has done the training, is ready to go to work, but then her child care goes away, it's a problem. So something has to happen. That's what I meant to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
Bishop Colette, would you like to speak on your comment?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, I actually had two comments. One was probably redundant. It was just talking about the dissemination of information, which DECA actually did a good job of responding to that. But the other question I had as I was listening to her presentation was, are the elected officials or the government officials, is everyone on board right now with the CWA PLA, or is this something that's still being negotiated? Because I saw that as a pivotal point to moving forward. Is this construct today the negotiation, or is that already been done, or are we still negotiating everyone's involvement? I'm just wondering where we are in the process.
So, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So the point of my presentation today was basically so I think all of the elected officials, everybody who's on the call today has bought into the idea of we want to work towards maximizing local hire on the ID1 Biden project. I think every stakeholder that is on this call, that was their agreement and their commitment. When I made my presentation, that was saying that this is going to be the best practice. If you really mean that commitment, if you really mean what you say, then this would be the way to do it. So that has not been negotiated. So what we're proposing is that they agree, that they buy into saying, yes, we are going to work on a CWA PLA, and then that process will be negotiated over time. So I say we didn't get an answer today, but I think it's a good question for everybody on this call to continue to ask all of their elected officials. And of course, the Urban Jobs Task Force will be following up on this in future big table conversations. If that answers the question, I hope.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
I also think I heard that when Greg chimed in, he said that we're not hearing anything that we're all saying no way, that everything that we heard sounds like we're on track to begin moving down that road. Sorry.
No. We're all up there.
No, I think we're.
Deputy Mayor, it's Greg Lowe, and you may have, I just dropped a question in. And so if I could ask, because it's reiterating part of a question that Peter King asked earlier in the text, that I'm interested in hearing from expertise on PLA and CWA regarding whether if build local, hire local is to progress, the environment gives us a build local, hire local change. What role do we have or need for PLA or CWA in that environment? What added benefits do they bring to a community?
So I think that Vanessa will be better suited, or Peter, if you want to actually talk.
I can, yep.
Yeah, to explain those, because the Urban Jobs Task Force, I'm not going to sit here and act like our focus is job. So that's what I can speak to.
This is Brittany. I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of Peter's question, since he was muted and they couldn't hear it. His question was, would a CWA or related workforce agreements on I-81 openly include public health and environmental justice concerns? Gillibrand's Build Local includes improving job quality and training.
And I
This
would
is
also, oh, go ahead. Go for it.
My sense is the PLA, CWA is around the work. And if the people are in the union, they're automatically going to have health benefits. Around environmental justice issues, maybe that is in, I'm not sure. When I've read PLAs, I haven't seen anything that's actually talking about environmental justice. Maybe in the record of decision, it is part of that. And so I sort of see the PLA, CWA as dealing with the workforce itself and how that work is going to get done. But maybe, and the other issues are actually maybe in the record of decision. But that's sort of off the top of my head, not an expert, so.
But I would say, like, yeah, I don't know if Vanessa hopped off the call, but I know that the NICU has created basically a list of community benefits that they've talked to a myriad of community organizations, including the Urban Jobs Task Force, to think about all types of things related to racial justice, economic justice, transportation, housing, things that we would typically find in the record of decision as community benefits related to the project overall. So I don't know, Peter, if those belong in the CWA PLA, but definitely think they're important. And again, encourage everybody on the line to connect with the Night King on the work that they've been doing around this project.
Hello. I wasn't thinking of a particular CWA that I'd seen, but just the fact that we do have environmental issues in Syracuse, and it, just another part of this is I actually appreciate a lot of the language that DOT has put into workforce quality and work site quality and things like dust control and so on and so forth. And just that environmental issues may be, in some cases, a barrier in themselves. And so just that was the gist of my question, is environmental issues as a barrier themselves.
I want to one more point, and then I'm going to wrap up so that the mayor can close us out and talk about next steps. I noticed the conversation DECA pointed out the SEP 14 program, federal program, and Kathleen Joy jumped on related to the Colorado project, that program was abolished by the current administration. Kathleen, if you're still on, can you speak to that for us, please?
Yes, hello, everybody. Yeah, the Colorado project was part of what they call the SEP 14 program, which is no longer available. We had hoped that the I-81 project would be able to incorporate that, and it's no longer. The Trump administration had canceled that. But there's some interesting concepts in that Colorado project, as Lanessa was talking about, and we can take a look at some of those creative ways to create jobs and job opportunities. But I just wanted to clarify that we can't really use the I-70 model because it had a different component to it, which mandated local hiring. That's why we're talking today on the roundtable about ways to work around that, to promote local hiring and creating jobs.
We could still look at the components and see what we can incorporate.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you all. We're going to make sure that we save the chat so we can make sure that we got everyone's questions. We really thank you for participating in this process. This is what we do in Syracuse. We did what should have been the unimaginable task, and we did it. So thank you all. Mayor?
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Council President, for facilitating that discussion. Similar to this meeting as a whole, it's a great start. Lots more difficult work to be done, but clearly a commitment from everyone here tonight that we're ready to do it. And we actually have some infrastructure in place to continue the work immediately. So I just want to talk about some next steps. I mentioned earlier on at the beginning about the work groups, and we have already established facilitators for each of those 4 work groups. So I'll just remind everyone of what those work groups are and identify, and in doing so, thank those that have volunteered to facilitate those work groups. First, again, we have the CWA, PWA work group, which we've talked a lot about. Andrew Kroom from CNY Legal Services and the Urban Jobs Task Force has agreed to be the facilitator for that work group. And we also have a co-facilitator in Greg Lancette, who you've heard from tonight. So thank you, both Andrew and Greg, for stepping up there. The Workforce Development Work Group is going to be facilitated by Chris Montgomery from SUNY Educational Opportunity Center, as well as Amy Durfee, who's here with us on the call from the Work Train program, and helping them by co-facilitating are the dynamic duo from the Carpenters, Mitch Latimer and Jim Mason. You heard from Mitch tonight, and Jim was also there. So Chris and Amy, Mitch and Jim, thank you for stepping up on workforce development. Business certification is going to be facilitated by Zach Zeliff from Senator May's office. So Senator May, thank you, and Zach, thank you. I know you're both on the call. And co-facilitator is going to be Lamont Mitchell from our team here at the City of Syracuse. Funding. The funding work group is our facilitator is Jen Tift, our Deputy Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development, who's here with us on the call. And the co-facilitator also here with us on the call is Dominic Robinson of Work Train, whose name you heard earlier. For everyone else, all the participants here around our virtual table, you're going to receive a survey by email tonight. So you can use that survey to indicate your preference of what work group you participate with. We're going to try to build balanced teams and get those meetings scheduled right away. So again, keep your eye out for that survey, get it filled out, and we'll get you assigned to your work group. We will then reconvene this big table in late fall, and who knows what the world will look like in late fall. But I know that there will be a lot of work done between now and then, so I want to thank you all in advance for that work. And we will continue it. I do want to mention there's a lot of others that I haven't mentioned, important partners here, but I did specifically want to thank the New York State Attorney General's office for also participating on the call, and John Moss is here representing the AG's office. And I'd be remiss, here we are, we've spent a couple hours talking about 81. Frankly, I don't think any of us would be having this conversation if it wasn't for Van Robinson, our former Syracuse Common Council president. Van was talking about 81 before almost any of us were talking about 81. So I want to thank Van for not only initiating the conversation, but continuing it on and still being with us here today to hold us out all accountable. So with that, again, thank you all for taking the time. Thank you all for the work you've done up to this point and the work that we are all going to do together. But as I said at the beginning, if all of us continue to sit around this table, I have no doubt that we're going to accomplish everything that we've discussed here tonight. So thank you all, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Good night.